in your introductory physics class, you're going to get to something called Newton's 3 laws of motion. I'm going to explain them to you in the best possible way. Let's get to it. Newton's first law, Aristotle was wrong. And you may say, no, that's not true. I read the laws and that's not what it says. It says if no force acts on an object, it will move at a constant speed in a straight line. Okay, that is what it says. But it's really opposite of what Aristotle said. So, many, many years before Newton, Aristotle had ideas about motion, and he said that if you push something, it moves, and if you stop pushing, it stops moving. So his natural state of motion was at rest. If you don't do anything to it, it's going to be at rest. And so Newton's first law says, well, that's not true. If you don't do anything, it just keeps moving in a straight line. So it's really the opposite of that. Newton's second law says the net force on an object is the mass times acceleration. Now, what is acceleration? Acceleration tells you how the speed changes, how the velocity changes. So this says forces change the motion. And it's kind of the same thing as what this says, because if you say there's no force, there's no change in velocity, that's what Newton's first law says. So that's why Newton's first law is really just Aristotle was wrong. Okay. And this is actually a vector. I didn't write it as a vector, but it also says that if you increase the force on an object, the total force on an object, you increase the acceleration. If you increase the mass of the object, you decrease the acceleration. Finally, we have Newton's third law. It says that forces come in pairs. So if object A pushes on object B pushes back on object A with the equal and opposite force. Now, again, this one people get wrong. It's fine. It's okay if you do. So a lot of people will say, oh, for every force, there's an equal and opposite force. That's the best way. But other people say, for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. It's not wrong, but it implies that these things have to be moving, right? Action isn't something at rest. And so it really just, they didn't have the best terminology for these terms like forces and things like that. But this is forces come in pairs. Forces are an interaction between two objects. That is Newton's 3 laws. Hope you enjoyed that.